Hello, today is Wednesday, November 6th, 2019. This is the Cluster API Office Hours meeting. This is being recorded. Cluster API is a subproject of SIG Cluster Lifecycle, and we do have a meeting etiquette for this meeting. So please use the raise hand feature in Zoom if you would like to speak, and I will do my best to see who's got their hands up and call on you. Additionally, if you do have discussion topics, please feel free to add them either to the PSA section or the discussion topics section in this document. And finally, before we get started, please make sure that you add your name to the attending list. All right, first up, we have some PSAs that I believe came from Vince.
Yeah, I wrote this. Sorry, I didn't have my name. I would like to start opening tracking issues for work items for each proposal that we have either merged or open. The specifically cluster cuddle and testing framework have been merged, so congrats everyone for that achievement. We have control plane that I think it needs a little bit more time, but it has been open for 20 days. I think there is like some things that we can actually extrapolate from there, and we can always close or edit issues if we need to. And machine pool and node remediation have also been open. In general, I would love if some people can volunteer in here and the doc to kind of start opening up work items, so that we can just like start understanding like if we can do everything in this cycle.
And just as a reminder, if you weren't here last week, we did propose and have consensus that rather than trying to do a time-boxed release in mid-January, we don't think that there's enough development time to get everything done by that time. So we are delaying the release of the V1 Alpha 3 version of Cluster API to sometime in late February or early March, if that's feasible. And we'll revisit the timing as we get closer once we've started actually implementing some of these items that Vince was just talking about. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the tracking issue discussion here? So, Andrew.
Yes, so I've worked on some items in CAPI before, but generally just more like help wanted items. So I'm wondering, what is the way that people should account for estimated time worked? Do we care about that? I know that's minutia, but it helps me also think about whether I have time to work on something, if I can try to estimate it, and then maybe I can add that to the issue or something.
Have you seen the, sorry, I'm responding on a turn. Have you seen the cluster or the SIG cluster lifecycle modus operandi for how we triage issues and deal with execution?
Well, Tim, if I had, no. Yeah, I'll go look at that. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, that basically outlines a way to have parallel execution and sign ownership and get things done.
Great. Yeah, I'll take a look at that. Maybe other people haven't seen it either, so maybe it wasn't completely a dumb question, but I learned something at least. Thanks, Tim.
Can you post the link in the notes, please?
Will do.
Thanks.
Alan, I saw you unmuted. Did you have a comment?
No, I don't know why I unmuted, sorry.
Okay, no worries, thanks. All right, I don't see any demos or POCs listed here, but I will do a call just to see if anybody's got anything. All righty, Jason, you have the only discussion topic currently listed.
All right, so it'll probably be easier if I go ahead and I share my screen to discuss this topic. I haven't had a chance to fully triage this issue yet, but I did want to bring it to people's attention. So let's see. All right, here we go. Hopefully you're seeing a test grid page right now.
Yep.
Yep. All right, so we now have automated periodic EDE jobs running against the AWS provider master branch. And, just to give a comparison, we do have them going against the latest stable branch as well, and those ones are mostly green. If we jump over to the master branch, we see that we are having quite a few issues related to creation. So going in, as we, showing here, the issue is actually during cluster deletion. I had to do a little bit of work to add some context to the logs that we're seeing. But with that, one of the things that I noticed is that for V1 Alpha 3 clusters right now, when we go to actually delete the cluster, if a machine deployment's involved, the deletion's not actually happening successfully right now. And where I've gotten so far is that it's only detecting 3 children in the cluster right now, and it appears to be the actual 3 control plane instances. So I think we have some going on with the way we're mapping machine sets and machine deployments there. I'm going to continue kind of digging in and triaging this, but I think this is showing that it's a good sign that we're starting to get early CI signal against the development releases now compared to previous releases.
Yeah, I'm happy to help you look at that. If you don't get through it today, Jason, I'm kind of booked for most of the rest of the day, but I was probably the last one in there making changes to the cluster children code. So feel free to bug me if you've got some questions.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident I'll be able to finish root causing it today. But the main reason why I wanted to bring it up is that we're starting to actually get some really good EDE signal against V1 Alpha 3 compared to where we were at this point in the process in V1 Alpha 2.
Andrew and then Tim.
Jason, I was hoping that you had, maybe you could add the commit to the notes where you added the signal. It's something we've discussed doing in CAPV for a while, but one of the reasons that we haven't is because we're trying to figure out what's the best matrix to test. And since you've already done it with Kappa and we're thinking about doing it with CAPV, maybe we could get together and figure out, like, is there some standard set of standard matrix or combination?
So I think a lot of this probably aligns a little bit with the work that Chuck's currently doing for the EDE test framework, because ideally that framework would, provide kind of the scaffolding that we could use to kind of build up these tests. Other than that, I'm basically trying to track, as far as just the AWS provider stuff, I'm trying to track against, the stable release branch, make sure that, on post submit, we make sure that we're not breaking anything there and periodic jobs. And then just trying to track master to master as well, so that as we start implementing V1 Alpha 3, we're not, falling too far behind on the testing there. Ideally, we'd be able to start doing some more of these EDEs actually in CAPI using the Docker provider. And that would probably simplify some of this too, but we just haven't gotten there yet.
Got it. Thank you.
Tim?
I think this is a good area where we might want to have some people have cross coverage and maybe even create a role. I know we talked about this, but there's a lot of tests across all the providers if we really want to get thorny with it. And I don't think, I want Jason to go on vacation and spend time with his kids and stuff. So if there are other people who are interested in being sort of like the test shepherds or CI signal group, or if you have interest in sort of walking along to figure out how you can diagnose things through test grid, I think that's a good area that we could probably sort of build up skill levels for people who are interested, as well as, help get them engaged.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think part of the challenge right now is that we haven't had this level of signal before. So part of it's just, getting everything in place. But anybody who's interested, we do have a Google group that you can subscribe to, and I'll dig up the address for that. to get the alerts, and I am happy to screen share with anybody to show what it's like to walk through troubleshooting the alerts and all of that as well.
Jason, I didn't see any come in over the past several days. The job that you were showing, is that not one of the ones that has the alerting set up yet?
Oh, it's been coming in. I don't know. You should be getting it.
I'll sync up with you offline.
Yep. Yeah, I've been seeing them for all of the EDE jobs as well as the conformance jobs that DINS has been working on over the past.
I might have an overly aggressive email filter. Yep. Chuck, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to echo what Tim was saying there. I'll be opening a bunch of issues after I get a couple of patterns in place for the end-to-end framework stuff that should be able to distribute this work fairly evenly. So anybody who's interested, reach out to me or Jason or anyone else in the testing space.
Andrew, I see your hand is up. Is that from before, or do you have another follow-up? Okay, thanks. Anything else on this topic before we move on to the next one? Alrighty, Sudeep, you're up next.
Yeah, hi Andy. So yeah, I just have a basic query that, in case we have like running nodes, physical nodes or, nodes used up in AWS or GCP, and we have a need for increasing or decreasing the resource for that particular node. How do we do that in present context, and also ensuring that we give minimal impact to the running pods which are represented by the tenants, let's say?
I'm happy to answer, but if anybody else wants to take a stab at it, feel free to raise your hand or jump in. No? Okay. So the short answer is you don't. The machines in Cluster API are immutable, and you would need to create a replacement machine, or if you, preferably if you have a machine deployment, you would update the machine deployment such that you change the characteristics, and it would roll out a new set of machines matching what you're looking for.
Okay. Okay. Any plans for this? I mean, any likelihood for this to come up?
No.
Yeah.
Our mantra is immutable infrastructure. So no, no plans.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
Sure. Any other comments on that one? Okay. Juan Lee, machine pools.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick update on machine pools. So I have the proposal PR submitted against the CAPI repo, and then also a POC that's there. So if you've read it and have more questions, or feel like there are some areas that could use a bit more detail, I saw that Chuck had added a comment. I'll be responding to those and adding more detail to the doc. So please, if you're interested in shaping the feature, please get that information in as soon as possible. And then I wanted to also have a discussion, perhaps brief, about the idea of having a machine placeholder. So I have had a few questions about or requests even to have for the actual machine instances to have a corresponding machine placeholder for various reasons. So one reason is to perhaps be able to communicate some status about the machine, whether it's, it's as a provisioning or if it's in a failed state or it's even healthy. And also, as a potential opportunity for, I know we talked in the past about the idea of lifecycle hooks for the machine. So being able to, run some code either before or after, deletion to do things like coordinate and drain. perhaps other kinds of administrative tasks. And then finally, being able to have the let's see, the machine for different scenarios like scale down, we'll need to be able to potentially want to be able to choose the specific machines that will be deleted. And so placeholders might be a decent opportunity for that as well. And so I wanted to kind of just test the waters on that concept, and maybe it's something that you've already thought about. And if you have any thoughts or ideas around whether that's a good idea, I'd love to hear.
So I made a first pass through the proposal sometime, I think, early last week, and I've been on vacation for the past several days, and today is my first day back, but I definitely plan to check it out again. For the machine placeholders, that's, I'd say, I'm guessing that's the equivalent of a mirror pod in the API server for static pods on nodes. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the idea would be that it's I think it's pretty similar. You can think of it as the same as that concept.
Okay. Vince?
Yeah, I'm gonna take a look at the proposal today, hopefully, or tomorrow. But for the placeholders, I have some concerns, specifically around like fake machines. But I'm happy to go over and talk more, maybe in the PR, or like we can have like a specific meeting if that's necessary. But are you trying to tackle this for the POC, or like for this first iteration in V1.3, or is this more of a future work item?
Well, that's a little bit of what I was trying to get a feel for. I think there are some interesting potential scenarios there about around how that would work. I think the most critical thing to me to solve, given the current proposal, is how do we actually coordinate the coordinate and drain of each node? And I see this as a potential opportunity for that. But I wanted to kind of get a feel for is this something that the group has talked about before? Are there a bunch of downsides that we want to avoid? But yeah, I think it's that's one avenue to solve that problem. I think there are other ways to go and do that. But it's just wanted to see, since I did get requests from other folks on Slack and in other places around whether or not we could have that fake machine as kind of a way to communicate status and these other things. So I think, yeah, why don't we maybe have a breakout for this, or even just discuss it on the PR, and we can go from there.
Yeah, I think that sounds great, and I would like to kind of separate the responsibility, the solution that we're proposing of creating fake machines from the actual problem we're trying to solve. In the case of status, it's one problem, and node references and coordinate drain is yet another one.
Michael?
Sounds great.
Yeah, I think my problem with the fake machines, I don't have a problem with it fundamentally, but I'm just thinking about the user experience. Like if somebody deletes a machine, what's supposed to happen? Because that sounds like it's not really what you should really do. And if we're hoping to use the existing machine controller, I just don't really see it really fitting that model very well.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I'm trying to call out a separate meeting with the people that kind of want this feature, because I think we're proposing a solution before understanding what the actual problem is to solve.
Definitely. And just really quick. So, with machine deployment, right now, if you go and delete a machine, the machine gets deleted, right? And then the machine set should replace that machine. Is that?
It will scale back up again. It will see that the machine is not available anymore, and it will say like I don't have enough replicas, and so it will scale back up. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's have this as a separate discussion. I think that's the right thing to do.
Cool.
Okay. We are at the end of the planned discussion topics. I'm going to go over to backlog grooming now, and if you think of anything while I'm going through the issues and PRs, feel free to add it, and we'll come back to it assuming there's time. All right, so we have 9 issues that don't have a milestone, and the first one is publish YAML releases with and without the kubeadm bootstrapper. So this came out of a Slack discussion, or maybe last week's meeting, or both, where in Cluster API master right now, the YAML that we have, as well as the main.go for the manager, all assume that the kubeadm bootstrap custom resources and controller are all there. So this was a request to be able to deploy Cluster API without the kubeadm bootstrapper, both the custom resources and potentially the controller as well. So it seems reasonable to me to do this as part of V1 Alpha 3. So I'd like to include it in the milestone. And I would put this on important soon. So hope that works for y'all. If not, please speak up, or I will move on to the next one.
You want to solicit volunteers from the peanut gallery, Rico?
Sure. Anybody interested in taking this on? All right, maybe we'll come back, think about it.
So we can probably reach out to some of the Telos folks. I don't see any of them on the call today, but they may be interested in taking this on.
Okay. Let me reach out. Would you be interested in working on this? Okie doke. Next up, we have something that came out of the control plane proposal. This is support for various ways to provide a stable API endpoint. This is because we need a stable API endpoint so that we can rotate control plane members in and out of the cluster. And there was some back and forth where we said, well, maybe we should just put control plane endpoint as a top level field on the cluster spec. I think this is something that we need to resolve for this milestone. And if you have comments, please add them. I would encourage you to read through them and definitely weigh in if you've got an opinion. But I would like to put this in, and we need to do it. I think in the short term, we can most likely proceed with the control plane implementation once we get the proposal merged. And what the proposal says right now is that the cluster status API endpoints, which is a pre-existing field, will continue to be used to represent the control plane endpoint until we resolve this and come up with any alternatives. So again, if you have feedback, please take a look and let us know. All right. I opened up a couple issues here. Hold these up. This is about refactoring the machine set and machine deployment controllers to be consistent with the way that we've implemented the cluster and machine controllers. This is a long-term cleanup task. So basically in the machine deployment and machine set controllers, they will patch the machine set or machine deployment pretty much whenever there's a change. And the way that we've implemented cluster and machine is that we retrieve, say, the cluster, we create a patch helper and have it defer to do the patch at the end of the reconcile loop. And we go perform a bunch of logic, whatever we need to do, modify the resources in question. And then at the end of the loop, the defer statement activates and does the patch. And Vince and I were trying to debug something where he was trying to set, which field was it, Vince? On the cluster or machine deployment?
The selector.
The selector, yeah, thanks. And it was getting cleared even though we were setting it. And so it was rather difficult to figure out what code was wiping it out. So this is just a long-term thing that we'd like to do. So it doesn't necessarily need to be in the milestone, but so I would probably just put it in next at this point, unless somebody feels like we should definitely try and tackle it now.
I was going to try to tackle this, given that I have a fair bit amount of experience with these controllers, and if anyone wants to tag along, feel free to Slack me.
Okay, yeah, if you're going to work on it, happy to put it into the milestone. And this is the same thing just for machine deployments. Okay, next up is race condition in cloud init. I think this was, I don't know if we.
Yep. So this one was a really fun issue. Basically, what we found is that the Containerd service may not be fully started by the time that kubeadm init is run or kubeadm join is run on the host. It doesn't happen very frequently, but it is starting to happen. And basically, Tim came up with a decent suggestion of just adding a simple loop, running the pre-flight check of kubeadm, and wait for that to pass before we go ahead and proceed.
That's a good idea. Andrew, you've got your hand up.
Yes. So, Jason, you know this, so I'm sure there's a reason you didn't suggest this in the thread, but I'm just kind of curious, so I don't duplicate the suggestion. But Cloud Init, has the multiple stages, but it also has targets that can be used to set up dependencies. Can't we? I think it's called the networking stage. It's not when it stands up networking by the point which networking has to be online. Can't we have Containerd depend on that, and then I think it's the config stage that does the run commands. I mean, basically, couldn't we play around with that, or is there no standard way to do that unless we do it in the machine images?
I think the only way that we could do that is if we introduced a new target, and then, predicated that running. And I'd like to. I was trying to avoid Cloud Init, so the naive solution, gets us past the initial issue, and then we can find a more elegant solution longer term.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
All right, so I put this in the milestone, marked it important soon. Jason, can I assign this to you since you had an idea of how to do this?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this.
Okay, thank you. And if anybody's interested in working with Jason, please reach out. Okay, we have a build failure for CapD. Chuck, have you seen this?
Yes, I have seen this. I haven't had time to look at it though.
Okay. Well, we definitely need to do this. I don't know. I kind of feel like this might need to be critical urgent given that it's not working and we want CapD to work. How do you feel about that, Chuck?
Sure. I haven't encountered this not working, but I can try to reproduce today if you think it's important.
All right. Well, then I can make it a P1, and yeah, I think if you've got time to take a look at it, at least to see if you can reproduce it, that'd be useful.
I can make time.
Andrew?
Chuck, it looks like somebody is probably mounting a volume or setting a go path such to the place where they're checking out the code. Because I don't know why you would have go.mod at the root of your go path. So I imagine there's something there going on. So it's probably why you've seen it.
Yep.
Makes sense. Okay. This one I'd like to close. Can't apply a particular node role label at bootstrap time. And I know that Kubernetes has restricted or has made it more restrictive what labels you're allowed to assign to the node. So this is saying, trying to do this Kubernetes IO node label, and it's not an allowed prefix. So, and I know that Lubomir had said you can't do this, and it's by design. Anybody object to me closing this one? Tim, does that work for you?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Michael?
Perhaps if this is something that we think might crop up again, we might want to make a note about it in the docs.
Sure. Well, I can leave this open then. If we want to do this as a docs thing. Let me do that.
It seems like something we could add to the troubleshooting guide, Vince, because if people encounter this.
Okay. So we can stick this in the milestone. I'm going to say long term. And we've got help wanted here. Anybody want to sign up to do this, or just wait and see if anybody picks it up from the community?
So does it make sense to actually have this as documentation against us, or documentation against, make sure the documentation for kubeadm is correct here? Because we're inheriting this behavior from kubeadm. It's not behavior on our side directly.
That's why I suggested a part of troubleshooting and then just link to the kubeadm docs.
Michael, you got your hand up?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we're directing people to use kubeadm, wherever we're doing that direction, that's where we should say, like, make sure you read this thing first in troubleshooting tips or whatever. I don't think we need to be the root of that information, but we should link to it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. This in a troubleshooting guide and link to kubeadm docs for this. And we can get rid of awaiting more evidence, triage support. Okay, let's move on. Cluster status phase should be provisioned after an API server endpoint is available. Vince, it looks like you've been in here.
Yeah, I'm not super opposed to this. It seems like it's just a cosmetic change. I did want to check with Andrew about the code change, and yeah, I pinged you on this from vSphere perspective.
All right, well, given that there is a PR for this, I'm going to put it in the milestone, but I definitely think that we should get feedback like you were asking for before we look at merging. Andrew?
I have no real issues with this. I mean, to me, it's in line with the thing that I tell people when about their misconception about cluster API. We don't provision clusters, we provision API endpoints that can be configured. So to me, provision means when the API endpoint's ready.
Sounds like we just need to rename cluster to infrastructure and we'll be good, right?
There you go.
I'll see myself out.
I assume that's come up before.
Oh, just a few times. All right, let me pop that there. And I'm guessing that VJ did this. Alrighty, I also want to spend some time looking at this, so I'll come back to that separately. And this one, this is control plane machines that you try to create after you delete a control plane machine, get stuck in pending. And the issue here is that given that we don't deal with etcd membership management, you can't delete a control plane machine unless you also manage etcd's membership. So I had a comment here just saying we hopefully can address this as part of the KubeADM control plane. Jason, does that sound right to you?
Yep, I think that's correct.
Right. And do you want to keep this open until we implement the KubeADM control plane?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. And for right now, I'm just going to assign this to you, Jason, but feel free to reassign later on if needed. Alrighty, that is the end of the issues with no milestones. And given that we have some time, let me just see, there's no new issues or grooming topics. So, or sorry, discussion topics. So let's just go and take a look at the open PRs. I talked with Andrew earlier today, and he said he is going to put the finishing touches on the PR for how to update an Alpha 1 provider to Alpha 2. The KEP control plane PR we already discussed today. This one here from Noah on changing the remote new cluster client signature. It's been open for a while, and I think most of the comments have been resolved. I did want to point this out to anybody who is using let me show you what this looks like. Right, so if you are using the new cluster client in the remote package, which currently takes in the management cluster client and the cluster and returns a custom interface that we had defined, it now takes in the management cluster client, the cluster, and a scheme and returns a controller runtime client that is for the remote cluster. So anything you can do with controller runtimes client, you can do with this, the output from this function. It is a breaking API change, so we're obviously not making it in V1 Alpha 2, it's just in master and will be in V1 Alpha 3. But I did want to point this out before we merged it in case anybody's got any concerns, but I think this should hopefully make it easier for anybody to do work with the workload clusters versus trying to use this cluster client interface, which was pretty limited. So I'd like to try and get that merged today unless anybody has any serious objections. So please take a look at 1633, and if you don't have any comments in the next couple hours, we'll probably get merged. Okay, so we have a whip to get the Azure tabs added to the quick start. Cecile, is that still a whip?
Here, but
Hey, yeah, I'm just waiting for a new image to replicate so I can update the image reference there. But I'm not actively working on it. I just have to rebase and address, I think, one comment.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just on hold for now.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
And then we have the machine pool API, which we talked about. I know Liz is working on documentation for how to go from 0 to a new provider. It's still a work in progress, so feel free to check it out if you want, but I know she had a lot more changes she was going to be doing. All right, let's talk about the remediation KEP. So I'll repeat, I've been on vacation for the past several days and haven't looked at this. Someone who has looked at it more recently, how's it looking?
So I know there were a bunch of updates made to it today. I haven't had a chance to go back and look at it after those updates, though.
Okay. So probably need some more review, then it sounds like. Okay. That's auto select on cluster name label in machine deployment and machine set. This was the change that we were going to do so that you don't have to specify a label selector, right? For machine set, machine deployment.
Yes. So yeah, this also fixes the bug that like the status dot selector is not there. There was a kind of like a proposal / conversation about like removing selector match selector from the machine deployment.
Right.
If you want to do this in V1 Alpha 3, this doesn't do that yet, but it just simplifies with using the cluster name.
Okay, so this one will take whatever label selectors defined and add an additional key value check on the cluster name.
Exactly. There was another one that instead what it does is that it adds like a new label, which is the machine deployment name and the machine set name to both machine set and machines. And that was mostly like for filtering. But I remember that we had a conversation in our PR to kind of extend that so that like we can actually like remove the match selector altogether and just use those new labels, which is on the machine deploy and machine set name.
Did that get merged?
I don't remember. I think so.
The one that adds the machine deployment and machine set labels, yes, that did get merged.
Okay.
Is it worth opening up an issue if one doesn't already exist to potentially remove the user specified selector, or is there still value
I think so. I think we should open an issue first.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do that.
All right. Is this one okay? Is this one pretty much ready to go?
Yes, it is.
All right, I'll try and, well, I don't know that I'll have time today, but try and look at it soon. Okay, machine pool API, let's see. Check existence of control plane, machine control plane label name, label instead of value. And this one I thought was close to ready to go. Are we still waiting on a couple of things? Looks like it.
Yeah, waiting for some documentation changes.
Okay, so this one is a change to address this issue where the utility method that we have to check if something is a control plane machine would return true for any non-empty string value for the label, which meant if you put false or 0 or whatever, it would come back as saying it's a control plane machine. And so what we are doing for Alpha 3 is saying that any value, including the empty string, means that it's a control plane machine. So true and false aren't relevant anymore for this particular label. Alrighty, so we had the capd verify script fixes to talk about that issue that Chuck was going to look at. We have set machine phase to provision regardless of infrastructure readiness. And I know there was some pretty strong back and forth on the related issue here. I know, Michael, you were pretty opposed to it, right? Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, any kind of flip-flopping of statuses. But like I was saying, the machine is the infrastructure to host a node. Node readiness not really a function of the machine, in my view. And, you know, it just kind of goes down into that rabbit hole of cluster health and all that kind of stuff and what we should be watching. And as I mentioned in my comments, I think the right place to be looking for that information is the node. I don't know if I have any more to add
Yeah.
at the moment.
Well, I think we probably should, like other issues in PRs, if you haven't seen these before, please take a look and comment if you've got opinions. Vince, I see your hands up.
Yeah, the link PR doesn't actually touch that on that yet. It's actually just changes to provision when the infrastructure is not ready. So like regardless if there's a node ref, regardless if the infrastructure is ready or not, like it will saying that it's provisioning. So there was like another issue that was open to add a new state, which I think was waiting, which is kind of like what we talk about, but we can punt that for later. Like I don't think it needs to go in this cycle, but yeah, this is like a little bit more scope down.
Yeah, I personally think this one makes sense.
Yeah, it's probably fine.
Yeah, I would say maybe unlink it from the issue if the issue's broader. Then also, yes, having it go to provisioned as soon as there's a node ref, that seems reasonable. Personally, I would consider it provisioned as soon as we have networking. That means that the cloud has created the instance and assigned it some kind of networking, and so therefore the instance is provisioned. But I know maybe the bootstrap flow for everyone else might mean, well, we still got to run the bootstrapper after we do the networking. So, but it's kind of I'm not really sure what's actually going on there with the bootstrapper. But yeah, either way.
Yeah, I think this one makes sense. Alrighty. Then we have another one related to status. Oh, this is the PR for the issue that we already talked about. All right. Anything else that anybody wants to chat about? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And